What happens when one of the most unpredictable figures in entertainment sits down with late-night television, only to have everything spiral completely out of control? Tonight, we're diving into the explosive confrontation that had security scrambling, producers panicking, and viewers witnessing television history in the making. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment letting me know your thoughts on this absolutely wild situation, because you're not going to believe how this all went down. It started like any other Tuesday night episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The host delivered his opening monologue with his usual charm, cracking jokes about the day's headlines while the studio audience laughed along. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary as Kimmel wrapped up his comedy segment and turned to introduce his guest for the evening. But what happened next would become one of the most talked-about moments in late-night television history. Our next guest is a Grammy-winning artist, fashion mogul, and someone who never fails to generate headlines, Kimmel announced with his trademark smile. He's here tonight to talk about his new music and, well, probably a few other things. Please welcome Kanye West. The audience erupted in their typical enthusiastic applause, phones already emerging from pockets, as viewers sensed they might be witnessing something worth recording. When Kanye emerged from behind the curtain, something immediately felt different. Gone was his usual animated entrance, the waves to the crowd, the energy that typically accompanied his television appearances. Instead, he walked with deliberate, almost mechanical precision toward the guest chair. His expression was stone-faced, his designer black jacket perfectly pressed, but his demeanor suggested this would be no ordinary interview. The applause from the audience began to taper off as they picked up on the unusual atmosphere. Even through their television screens, viewers at home could sense the tension building in the studio. Kanye took his seat without acknowledging the crowd's welcome, his gaze fixed directly on Kimmel with an intensity that was immediately noticeable to anyone watching. "Kanye, thanks for being here," Kimmel began, extending his hand in the customary greeting. The handshake that followed was awkward, lasting just a beat too long, with Kanye's grip appearing unusually firm. "How are you doing tonight?" It was the kind of softball question that typically opens every talk show interview, designed to ease both guest and audience into the conversation. "I'm doing exactly what I need to be doing, Jimmy," came Kanye's response, his voice carrying an edge that cut through the studio's atmosphere like a blade. "The question is, are you ready for what I have to say?" The words hung in the air, and viewers could see Kimmel's smile falter for just a moment. The audience shifted in their seats, the energy in the room palpably changing. Kimmel attempted to maintain his professional composure, letting out what sounded like a nervous chuckle. "Well, I hope so," he replied, his voice carrying just a hint of uncertainty. "You've certainly been keeping busy. New music, lots of activity on social media. Let's start with the music, shall we?" He gestured toward his note cards, seeking refuge in prepared questions, but Kanye's response would derail any hope of a standard celebrity interview. Leaning back in his chair, Kanye displayed a smile that viewers would later describe as unsettling. "You want to talk about music, Jimmy? Or do you want to talk about the real issues?" His voice grew stronger, more confident. "Because I know what your producers told you to ask me, and I know what they told you not to ask me." The accusation was direct and unmistakable, landing with the force of a verbal punch. For the first time since the interview began, Kimmel's practiced television persona showed cracks. His response came slower than usual, his confidence visibly shaken. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "We're here to have a conversation about whatever you'd like to discuss." Even as the words left his mouth, viewers could see he was losing control of his own show. "Whatever I'd like to discuss," Kanye repeated, leaning forward now, his presence seeming to expand and fill the entire frame. "Because I've got a lot to say, Jimmy, about the industry, about the media, about the people who've been trying to silence me." His voice gained momentum with each word. "You sure you're ready for that conversation?" The challenge was unmistakable, and the studio fell into an uncomfortable silence that translated directly through television screens across the country. Viewers watching at home could feel the tension building, sensing they were about to witness something unprecedented. Social media would later explode with posts from people claiming they could feel the awkwardness through their televisions. Kimmel glanced away from his guest for just a moment, his eyes darting toward something off-camera. When he turned back to Kanye, his expression had hardened slightly, the jovial late-night host giving way to someone preparing for battle. "Kanye, you know we always have honest conversations on this show," he said, his voice steadier now. "What's really on your mind tonight?" It was exactly the wrong question to ask. What was really on Kanye's mind that night would shock viewers and create one of the most controversial moments in television history. His response to Kimmel's question came like a dam bursting, unleashing a torrent of accusations and grievances that had clearly been building for some time. "What's on my mind, Jimmy?" Kanye's voice rose, his composure completely abandoned now. "What's on my mind is how you people sit here night after night, making jokes about me, about my family, about everything I've built, while you ignore the real conversations that need to happen in this country." His hands gestured wildly as he spoke, his entire body language transforming from controlled to explosive. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to applaud, boo, or simply watch in fascination. This wasn't the entertaining controversy they had expected. This was something raw and unfiltered. Kimmel's face showed a mixture of surprise and growing concern as he realized his guest was completely off script and potentially off the rails. "Kanye, I think you might be misunderstanding," Kimmel attempted to interject, but his guest wasn't finished. In fact, he was just getting started, and what came next would have network executives scrambling for their phones. "Misunderstanding?" Kanye shot back, his voice now carrying across the entire studio. "Jimmy, you had me on your show before, remember? You played that clip of me talking about my dreams, my vision for the future, and you turned it into a joke. You made me look like a fool in front of millions of people." His finger pointed directly at the host, the accusation landing with visible impact. Viewers at home could see Kimmel's face flush slightly, a clear sign that Kanye's words had hit their mark. The late-night host shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his usual quick wit seeming to abandon him in the face of such direct confrontation. "That was meant to be light-hearted," he said weakly, but his defense sounded hollow even to himself. "Light-hearted?" Kanye's voice cracked with emotion. "You think it's light-hearted to mock someone's mental health? To make jokes about someone who's been open about their struggles?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, and suddenly the interview had shifted into territory that made everyone in the studio deeply uncomfortable. The camera caught Kimmel's Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard, clearly searching for the right words. "Kanye, that was never my intention," he began, but once again found himself cut off by his increasingly agitated guest. "Your intention doesn't matter, Jimmy. Impact matters. And the impact of what you did, what your writers did, what this whole industry does, is that it silences people like me who are trying to speak truth." Kanye's voice had taken on an almost preacher-like quality, his words flowing with the rhythm of someone who had rehearsed this moment in his mind countless times. The studio audience was now completely silent, the usual energy of a live taping, replaced by the heavy atmosphere of witnessing something that felt too personal, too real for television. Some viewers would later report feeling like they were eavesdropping on a private argument that had spilled into public view. Kimmel made another attempt to regain control of his show. "Look, if I offended you, I apologize. That's not what we're about here. But maybe we can talk about your music, your recent projects." His voice carried a pleading quality that regular viewers had never heard before, the desperation of a host watching his carefully planned show dissolve into chaos. "My recent projects?" Kanye laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You mean the projects that got me banned from platforms? The songs that streaming services won't play? The art that's been censored because it makes people uncomfortable? His voice grew louder with each question, his frustration becoming more evident with every word. The camera alternated between close-ups of both men, capturing every micro-expression, every moment of discomfort. Kimmel's professional mask was slipping further with each passing second, while Kanye seemed to grow more energized by the confrontation, as if he had been waiting for exactly this moment to unleash everything he had been holding back. Kanye, I think maybe we should take a break, Kimmel suggested, his voice now clearly strained. It was an unprecedented move, something that simply didn't happen during live tapings unless there was a genuine emergency. The suggestion seemed to infuriate his guest even more. A break? Kanye stood up from his chair, towering over the seated host. You want to take a break now? When we're finally having a real conversation? When someone is finally telling the truth on your show? His movement was sudden enough that viewers could see Kimmel instinctively lean back in his chair, a natural reaction to his guest's sudden proximity. The standing position gave Kanye a commanding presence that filled the television screen. His voice carried clearly across the studio as he continued his tirade. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Jimmy. The moment someone starts speaking truth, the moment someone challenges the narrative, you want to cut to commercial. You want to silence the conversation. Kimmel's attempts to maintain professionalism were becoming more strained by the second. Nobody's trying to silence you, Kanye. You're on national television right now. You have the platform. His words seemed reasonable, but his delivery lacked conviction, as if he himself wasn't entirely convinced by his own argument. I have the platform? Kanye's voice rose to a near shout. Jimmy, they deleted my accounts. They removed my music. They've tried to destroy everything I've built because I refuse to stay in the box they created for me. His hands gestured wildly as he spoke, his entire body language conveying the intensity of his emotions. The audience was now visibly uncomfortable, with some people looking around as if seeking an exit. The energy in the room had shifted from entertainment to something that felt dangerously unpredictable. Viewers at home were witnessing what appeared to be a complete mental breakdown happening in real time on national television. What happened next would force the show into an unprecedented decision that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. The breaking point came when Kanye began pacing behind his chair, his movements becoming increasingly erratic as his voice reached levels that had audience members covering their ears. What started as a heated exchange had devolved into something that felt genuinely dangerous for everyone involved. You know what the real problem is, Jimmy? Kanye's voice echoed throughout the studio as he gestured dramatically. The real problem is that people like you pretend to care about free speech, about open dialogue, but only when it fits your agenda, only when it makes you comfortable. His pacing had brought him closer to Kimmel's desk, and viewers could see the host's knuckles whiten as he gripped his note cards. Kimmel made one final attempt to salvage the situation. Kanye, please, let's just sit down and have a conversation. Like adults, he pleaded, his voice carrying a desperation that was painful to watch. But his words only seemed to fuel Kanye's anger further, triggering an explosion that would shock everyone watching. Adults? Kanye's laugh was harsh and bitter. You want to talk like adults? Then let's talk about how your industry has systematically destroyed black voices that don't conform to what you want to hear. Let's talk about how you silence anyone who challenges the system. His voice had reached a crescendo that reverberated throughout the studio, and it was at that moment that viewers first noticed movement at the edge of the screen. Security personnel began appearing in the background, their presence subtle at first, but becoming more obvious as Kanye's behavior grew more unpredictable. The camera operators, trained professionals who had seen countless interviews, seemed uncertain about where to focus, the situation clearly beyond anything in their usual experience. I've built an empire, Jimmy, Kanye continued, seemingly oblivious to the security presence. I've created art that will outlast all of us, and you people want to tear it down because I refuse to play by your rules. Because I refuse to be the puppet you want me to be." His movements had become increasingly animated, his hands cutting through the air as he spoke. The audience was now visibly distressed, with some people standing as if preparing to leave. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted from uncomfortable to genuinely frightening, and viewers at home could feel the tension through their screens. Social media was already exploding with real-time reactions from people watching the meltdown unfold live. Kimmel's face had gone pale, his usual television confidence completely abandoned. "Kanye, I think we really need to take that break now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper but still audible through his microphone. It was clear that he was no longer trying to conduct an interview, but simply trying to end a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. "There's no break from the truth, Jimmy," Kanye shot back, his voice now hoarse from shouting. "There's no commercial break from reality. This is what happens when you invite someone on your show who refuses to play the game." He turned toward the audience, addressing them directly for the first time since the interview began. "You all came here for entertainment, right? Well, this is what real entertainment looks like. This is what happens when someone tells the truth." The camera caught several audience members shaking their heads, their faces showing a mixture of concern and fear. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something else entirely. Something that made everyone present deeply uncomfortable. The energy in the room had become toxic, poisonous in a way that seemed to affect everyone it touched. It was then that security made their move. Two large men in dark suits stepped into the camera frame, their presence immediately commanding attention. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," one of them said, his voice calm but firm. The moment had arrived that everyone watching had been dreading and anticipating. Kanye turned to face the security personnel, his expression shifting from anger to something that looked almost like vindication. "There it is," he said, his voice suddenly quieter, but still carrying clearly through the studio. "The moment you've all been waiting for. The moment they silence the voice that won't be controlled." He spread his arms wide, as if embracing his fate. "Kanye, please," Kimmel said one final time, but his words fell on deaf ears. The rapper had found his moment of martyrdom, and he wasn't going to let it pass quietly. The security personnel moved closer, their body language professional but unmistakably serious. "Sir, you need to come with us now," the lead officer repeated, his hand moving toward Kanye's arm. The contact was gentle but firm, and it triggered the final explosion of the evening. "Don't touch me," Kanye snapped, pulling his arm away sharply. "I'll leave, but I'm leaving on my terms." He turned toward the camera, looking directly into the lens with an intensity that seemed to burn through the screen. "Remember this moment," he said, his voice carrying a prophetic quality. "Remember the night they couldn't handle the truth." The walk toward the exit felt like it lasted forever, though it probably took less than 30 seconds. Kanye moved with deliberate slowness, milking every moment of his dramatic departure. The security personnel flanked him but didn't touch him again, allowing him to maintain some semblance of dignity in his removal. Kimmel sat frozen at his desk, his face a mask of shock and confusion. The studio audience remained silent, unsure whether to applaud, boo, or simply sit in stunned silence. The camera lingered on the empty guest chair for a long moment before cutting back to Kimmel, who looked like a man who had just witnessed a car crash. "We're going to take a quick break," Kimmel finally managed to say, his voice barely steady. "When we come back, we'll have some music for you." It was a weak attempt to return to normalcy, but everyone watching knew that normal had left the building with Kanye West. The incident would dominate news cycles for weeks, spark countless debates about mental health and media responsibility, and become one of the most watched clips in late-night television history. But for those who witnessed it live, either in the studio or at home, it would remain a moment of pure, uncomfortable truth about what happens when television's carefully constructed reality collides with someone who refuses to play by the rules. What did you think about this explosive confrontation? Have you ever seen anything like this on live television before? Subscribe for more breakdowns of the wildest moments in entertainment history. And drop a comment below with your thoughts on whether Kanye was justified in his outburst or if he crossed the line.